Thanks very much for taking the time to join us again. We do appreciate it. What's your reaction to what we heard there from Pat McFadden this morning?
Well, I was surprised that you got me on here to talk about that, actually. I thought there'd be something more kind of important to talk about. I mean, what Pat said, I understand. For me, it seems like an old issue. I give money to Labour. I give money to Just Stop Oil. I give money to women's refuges, to Greenpeace, to Sea Shepherd, to school breakfast clubs, to food banks. What is there to talk about? I'm happy to talk about Just Stop Oil and the climate protest and why they do it. But other than that, I'm not sure why I'm here.
Well, it's laudable indeed, the other charities that you support. But if I could just ask you to perhaps indulge us and react to what we heard from Labour this morning.
Well, like I said, I heard what he said and I understand it.
But would you continue to go and protest?
If I feel like it, I will. Absolutely. I don't see why I wouldn't. As Pat said, I'm a free citizen, and protest is a right, a fundamental right in our country that's being eroded, in fact, by the Conservative government in terms of disruption to sporting events and to everyday lives. The climate crisis is doing that now, all around us. 40,000 people lost their lives last year in Europe because of excess heat, extreme heat. And around the world, the UN estimate that 4 million people have already lost their lives due to the climate crisis. This is a form of disruption that we seem to be happy to turn a blind eye to.
Well, it's not just Mr. McFadden who's saying that this morning. Trevor Nielsen, as you know, who co-founded the Climate Emergency Fund, once supported the tactics of Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion. He's now said that it's become disruption for the sake of disruption. What would you say in response to that?
Well, I don't know, Trevor. I did hear those comments yesterday. I think he called it performative art rather than protest or something like that. And I was struck by the thought that actually art is a powerful, cultural force. Actually, it changes how we look at the world and perhaps affects how we choose to live. And, I think that for the last 3 weeks, I've been on all forms of media, radio, TV, in the press, that kind of stuff, talking about not just Stop Oil and the protests, but what's behind that. The climate crisis being driven by fossil fuels and the absurd idea of drilling more oil and gas out of the North Sea in the face of that and the science of the climate crisis. An international scientific and political opinion that says we must not drill for more fossil fuels.
You're right, he did call it, Mr. Nielsen did call it performative, but he also said it wasn't accomplishing anything.
Yeah, and I go back to my point, the last 3 weeks, all I've been doing is talking about these issues, the climate crisis driven by fossil fuels and the absurdity of drilling for more of them in the teeth of all the scientific and political consensus around the world. And that's, for me, evidence of the success of the protest, because it's given a platform to talk about this issue. It's not being brushed under the carpet. We're here talking about it almost every day of the week for the last 3 weeks.
But we do need everyone to be involved, as you quite rightly say, in order to try to confront climate change. Disrupting people going to work or taking their children to school or whatever else they might be doing, how does that then mean that people will work together with Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion or whatever? In fact, it just seems to be driving a coach and horses between what you're trying to achieve and how people feel about it.
And look, I understand this is the media narrative. I'm not convinced that you understand the aims of Just Stop Oil completely. This is about raising awareness of the issue, protesting, calling on the government to stop this thing that they're doing, the kinds of disruptions that you're talking about, going to work, going to school. I mean, they're short-term, they're very temporary, they're here today, gone tomorrow. The climate crisis, if it fully lands, is the end of everything, the end of life as we know it, the biggest disruption we could possibly imagine. Take the COVID disruption, lockdowns and stuff like that and square it, and it won't go away. There's no vaccine for it.
I understand that, Mr. Vince, but my point to you is that are there not other ways to achieve this? Because all this seems to be doing is driving a wedge between people who are trying to go about their everyday business and people who are trying to disrupt them from doing that.
Well, if there is another way to achieve this, tell me. I'll be interested to hear it. I think that this is doing far more than just driving a wedge. I do think that's a media narrative. I do understand that some people are upset about it. I was on a march a couple of weeks ago around Parliament Square. But for everybody that was angry,
as a media narrative, what do you think we're trying to achieve?
I don't know. But for everybody
I'm interested. What do you think the media's trying to achieve?
Let me just tell you this, for everybody that was angry, there was somebody that was supportive and positive. And I think there are millions of people in our country that care about this issue. The YouGov poll from last week showed that nearly 70% of people want more action on the climate crisis. So I think Just Stop Oil do represent a groundswell of opinion. And yes, we can argue all day about whether this is working or not, but here we are arguing about it on TV, which I think is a good thing.
You see, I think we're debating it rather than arguing about it. I'm just intrigued to know what the media narrative is.
Well, the media narrative is that it's not working, that it's putting people off, and it's harmful.
It wasn't my words. It was the guy that first came up with the attempts to try to support people like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion. Not my words, his. And we're giving you a platform in order to be able to respond to that. I'm asking you why you feel that is. What's the difference between that and the media narrative that you're talking about? I don't get it.
Well, I think he came out yesterday and said what he said, and this media narrative has been going on for several weeks. So I think he's not created something new, and it's just the same. Listen, it's not a big deal, but it's a constant media theme and narrative that it's not working, and that's all we're talking about, that it's not working. But we are talking about Just Stop Oil, the climate crisis, and how foolish it is to drill for more oil and gas in the North Sea.
And there was me thinking I was giving you a platform to respond. It's good to talk to you.
And I have
there
responded.
We go. So there's no narrative here. We're just trying to get both sides of the story. That's what we do here on Sky News. Thanks for taking the time to join us again. We appreciate it. Thank you. Also want to talk about what's happening in